Hey everybody, and welcome back to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. I just got done interviewing, and I'm going to try to say it right now, Ephraim Herschmann. He said his name out loud at the end of our interview, and I realized that I was saying Ephraim, and it's Ephraim. At least I think it is. Anyway, he is a kind, considerate, courteous, and very intelligent, warm, passionate, sweet man, and he's just turned 30, like a few days ago. And I am so proud to introduce yet another sparkling example of a young person who actually seems to be amazing and awesome, despite what you may or may not read about in virtually every online site that just constantly denigrates the youth of not just America, but the world. As you know, I'm a huge proponent of life springing hope eternal. I have young children. I don't consider Ephraim a child, but I do consider all of us children growing up and growing old and then dying. And so that's kind of why I do host a show called Coffin Talk. And I am just like absolutely, I'm on cloud nine. I just feel like rejuvenated, and I got like a reminder of like elements of my youth. And I think when you get done with this interview, you're going to be very shocked by all of his opinions, and not because they are controversial, but because you're going to be surprised that someone as young as he is can have lived enough life to actually explain and articulate the decisions he's made and how he lives. So most of the interview is me just getting to know him because he's a really interesting guy. He's a high school teacher. He's a father of two. He's happily married. He grew up in outside New York. He said upstate New York, but it's like 45 minutes outside the city. I don't call that upstate New York. I call that New York. I call Ithaca upstate New York. And if you're listening, shots fired if I'm, no, I'm kidding. But for real, he's just a wonderful guy, and I'm really, really proud of this episode. We get into so many interesting topics, and I really hope that these are making a difference. I hope that whatever small, minimal impact I'm having on the people of Earth, I hope it's good. Because all I'm really trying to do with the show, and I say it not often enough, is just show everyone how many diverse and interesting and unique people are out there, that we can't be stereotyped. Maybe you could just stereotype the whole human race and say something ugly or blunt about it, but in general, most of us are complicated, and most of us are full of love and yearning to be loved, and whatever's off is because that equation is off. And often it's something that happened in childhood and we don't even know about it. So we're like unconscious zombies walking through life. And the day we become conscious, conscientious, self-aware, vulnerable, humble is the day we really start living, and the day we start experiencing the joy in our heart that we once had when we were children. So once again, I am presenting Ephraim Herschmann on this episode of Coffin Talk. And as always, please support the show by heading over to mikeyup.com and also subscribing on our YouTube page. Thank you. Bye. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week, coming to us live from Florida, is Ephraim Herschmann. He's a father, salesman, high school teacher, and podcast host. And his show, Come Together with Ephraim Herschmann, aims to unify people with thoughtful conversations. How's it going?
It's going great, man. I'm so happy to be here.
Cool. Did I butcher your name? Because I didn't ask for a
No, you nailed it.
All right, cool. Awesome.
It's a super hard name. I tried going by, I just picked an arbitrary name for business for a couple of years because even getting people to send me an email was like, I got to spell it out, and they wrote it down wrong, and and then I was like, maybe I'll try Sid for a while, but the whole thing didn't work out. So
that's cool.
Now I just let people butcher it, and I mean, the closer you get to right, the better it is. But you got pretty close to it.
Awesome. Yeah, my last name's Oppenheim, and thanks to the movie, people sort of say it right now, but my whole life is the exact same S show. So yeah,
so funny. Yeah, definitely.
And South Florida, I'm familiar. I lived in Tampa. My mom's from Tampa, born and raised, and she went to USF. And my wife is from Miami. So which part are you from?
I'm in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area.
That's where my wife was born. That's awesome.
Cool. Really? So yeah. I live next door to Memorial Hospital. I'm sure she's familiar with it. And Tampa, I'm a big fan of, actually. I love Tampa. They have a great craft beer scene, which I'm a huge fan of.
Cool.
And one of my first podcast guest breaks was the professor of psychiatry there, Ryan Wagner, and the chair of psychiatry. And I drove up there to check it out at UCF, actually. and the nicest, sweetest guy and the coolest campus. So I got nothing but great things to say about Florida in general. And yeah, we were here for 4 years. We love it down here.
Cool. So you're not from there. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from upstate New York,
All
Rockland
right.
County, about
Okay.
45 minutes north of Manhattan. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. My brother just moved to Garden City, New York, but he was Queens most of his
Sure.
life. So yeah.
Yeah, cool place.
And then to round it out, you're wearing a yarmulke, so I'm going to make the grand assumption that you are a practicing Jew. Is that correct?
I am. I'm an Orthodox practicing Jew. It's funny because I don't really, people try. There's especially, I'm sure that different religions have this. I'm just not as aware of them, but there's a lot of different subsects within them that people tend to like to box themselves into, and I have a pretty hard time with that in general. I don't like boxes. And so I think the level of consciousness and the way that I act would, I guess, fall into that category of practicing. But I think that when it comes to my mindset and, living a little bit more out of the box, it's hard to kind of keep me, zoned into any particular area.
Yeah, and I forgot to ask you the three basic questions, which is how old are you? We already got where'd you grow up because you grew up in upstate New York, I'm assuming
Sure.
at least.
Yeah.
And then what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
Those are great questions. I just turned 30 a couple of days ago.
Nice, congrats. That's cool.
Thank you very much. It actually led me down a couple of day. I hope not a midlife crisis, but a couple of day crisis of entering my third decade. And the truth is that I definitely feel like I am a torch carrier from the 60s to today.
Awesome.
I'm a huge advocate of 60s culture, counterculture, hippies, and that music, that poetry. I mean, and I think a lot of what we have today, especially as far as culture and especially as far as our, I guess, more creative train of thoughts tend to come from that time, that very fertile creative period in general. So, this is the outgrowth of it. So I like to think of myself as a torchbearer. I think that if I lived in the 60s, I would probably have overdosed by now, but so it's a good thing that I was born, a couple of decades later, but I love that stuff.
That's cool. My parents are like legit hippies. They did not go to like protests and stuff like that, but they did everything else. So you can use your imagination. They don't love when I talk about them on the podcast, so I'll just nip it there. Sure. But
leave it there.
I'm glad they didn't overdose either. So
peace and love to them.
And I have so many complicated questions for you because I'm obsessed with like so many of your interests. Number one, with a bullet. My wife, while she is not Orthodox, was raised with Orthodox parents. Both of her mother just passed away very suddenly and traumatically, but she died a practicing Orthodox Jew. Her older brother is Orthodox. All of his children go to an Orthodox school in Chappaqua or somewhere around Chappaqua. And so my stereotypes of Orthodox Jews growing up Reform in California were like outlandishly wrong, but they weren't like completely wrong. You defy literally all of my current stereotypes for an Orthodox practicing Jew, and I'm going to explain why, just so you don't feel like assaulted or offended. Number one, with a bullet, you alluded to drug use, which to me is like preposterously open-minded. Number two, you have an Allman Brothers poster behind you, and I love the 60s. I love the Doors. I love like all that music. I, like played guitar because of most of that stuff, and like, so I'm a kindred spirit, but I'm also not practicing and not, I've walked a different life. Now, I do see room for it all, but I would just like to hear your out of the box answer for when people are like, no way, dude, like, where are your funny things hanging down from the side of your face? Like, why aren't you dressed in all black? Like, blah, blah, blah. You've heard it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a great question. And the truth is that your question wasn't at all offensive because a lot of practicing Orthodox Jews look at me and ask me the same question you did. So, it's not, I get it from everywhere. And the truth is that, that the way that at least my philosophy with this, with religion in general, is that it's a general guidebook for ways to navigate life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you got to box yourself into anything. It's just more about how you relate to the world around you. And so, for example, something even as simple as kosher, right? Like to have particular food that was, certified and checked to make sure that it was done with the appropriate traditions by an appropriate authority. You know, just that concept in and of itself, generally, I mean, as someone that keeps kosher my entire life and also travels all over, you know, you come to appreciate the food that you can have and the food that you can't have. And you come to appreciate that like when you have to work for something, that something is designated for you or not designated for you, that to how to have a relationship with it, and how to pursue it meaningfully. And so, for example, there's if I go, I used to travel a lot for business to deliver medical equipment, and I would sell the equipment, and I'd have a bunch of customers, say down the East Coast, so Virginia, Carolinas, and Georgia, right? And I'd say, okay, there's freight costs for all of them, and then I would load up the company van and drive on down and make a little trip out of it. I was a single guy, and I was in my early 20s, and I loved live music and breweries and checking out different parts of the world, and so but along this way, I'd have to find kosher food, or go to a supermarket and look out. And I think that my general relationship to food is a very healthy relationship now, because it's something that I'm very conscientious of. And when it forces you to be conscientious of things, you don't really act without thinking. And I think that's the general point of religion, is to enhance our awareness, and it's kind of like evolution for our consciousness. So it doesn't mean that you have to box yourself into a particular, style or shirts or clothes. It just is, how do you relate to the world around you? Some people have an easier time relating with more fences because it's more of a safe zone. So like, for example, if someone told you, hey, I want to stop, watching inappropriate things online, then the easiest thing to do is to get a block on your phone, or to swap out a phone completely. But I think the point being that there's a general sense of intentionality with almost everything that you do, and so that's how it manifests in my life.
That's really cool. That was a great answer. Unfortunately, I'm the kind of person who your one answer gave me 55 more questions. So we're gonna keep reeling this in. At some point, I am gonna ask you, what do you think happens when you die? I assure you. But I want to build towards that, because I'm getting such a good sense of how you live right now, and I like it. First of all, just in case that's not clear.
Thanks. Sure.
And I also especially appreciate how you're kind of flipping the script on like the universal stereotypes of religion, which is that it's now seen as something that is not elevating consciousness. It's barbaric and outdated. It's, tribalism at its worst, blah, 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 blah. And that's, not just in the three Abrahamic faiths, that's like more like, I mean, even, yeah. Well,
it certainly can be. It certainly can be, and I think it's a tool like anything else, and a tool could be abused or it could be used in the right way.
So I think my first question is, do you have a rabbi and a community that you do like listen to and adhere to, or are you like doing it your own way? And then this comes up because of watching my mother-in-law. Sometimes she'd be like, oh, I found out I can't do this. Like the rabbi was talking and he said that, and I was like, well, I mean, you can, like, that's, like you were doing it all the way until this moment. Like, I understand, like, no electricity, blah, blah, blah. But she also had a stove that stayed on Friday through Saturday.
Sure.
I saw that as a loophole. She sort of didn't. So that's the kind of stuff I'm getting at. Like, how much do you give into that, or like that, or, yeah. And do you have a rabbi?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I definitely do. I will say that I have had different rabbis at different points in my life, and not too dissimilar from, going to college, and let's say you're a creative writing major and you find an English teacher that you relate to very strongly, and then you go to college and you're an engineer and you find a teacher that you relate to very strongly, a professor you relate to. There's different sects also and different types of rabbis that have, they put emphasis on different syllables, and they'll tell you, and so it really would depend where you are in your life and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But I do. There's actually different categories of my life that I have different rabbis for. So, for example, when it comes to something that you gave the example for with like Shabbat or Sabbath, I don't roll on Shabbos. Um, they you you that's a little more technical, and that's a little bit more what you call like practices, like actual ways that your behavior manifests in the world. I definitely have those. But I've grown up in a very conservative, I guess, politically, and pretty orthodox and observant religiously environment. So a lot of times I'm already where you got to be as far as my behavior goes, that most rabbis would be like, listen, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're praying 3 times a day, and, you're spending time dedicated to learn every single day, and you're adhering to X, Y, and Z laws, and you're all right. But then there's more complicated stuff, which is, how do you relate to your wife if you guys are fighting? Or what do you do when your kid comes home and says, I'm not interested in this? And,
Oh, yeah.
and those are really serious questions. And these are questions that, unfortunately, if you wait for them to come up, you're too late. And so a lot of times you got to think about these things far in advance. And a big turning point in my life was when I I got married at 25, which is relatively young, but also relatively old for the Orthodox Jewish community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is pretty common around 20. For example, my wife was 21 when we got married.
Uh-huh.
And one thing I realized when I was about 23 or 24 was, I don't know when this stuff is going to happen, but I know I got to be as ready for it as possible. I don't know when I'm going to be a dad. I know I'm going to be a husband, and linking this to the conversation that Jen, I don't know I'm going to die, but I do know that all you got to do is spend the time that you have preparing to leave the world, or be ready to be in the best position for it when it does happen. And so that I'd have another rabbi for those type of questions, and then and so there's different categories in life that you kind of relate to different people for. If you're lucky, you have one guy that has everything, but like a professor or like university, it's very, very rare to have an English teacher that's an engineer and a doctor. It's all over the place. So that in short, I do. And I have different ones based on whatever aspect of my life I'm looking to relate to.
Cool. One of the things you brought up is something my wife and I used to spend time arguing on. Now we don't, but it's exactly what you said, which is, how are our children going to be affected by the different decisions we're making? And I should make it clear to my audience at the very least, and especially to you. I was raised what I would call culturally Jewish. My parents sent me to Hebrew school. And then when I was in 4th grade and my brother was in 5th or 6th, he said, I hate this. I want out. And I was his little brother. And I'm like, well, if he's not going, I'm not going. And that's it.
Sure.
That's the last time I looked at a Torah or did anything. Now, I can still say most of the basic prayers from memory. Every Friday we do light candles, and we make an effort to be what I'm referring to as culturally Jewish. It's not because I can't handle Judaism and I don't like it. It's because I just don't like tribes. I don't like being in groups. So it's more of for me, but my wife loves it. And especially after her mother passed, she's now
Sure.
really moving into it. And I'm not, I don't see that as a confrontational towards me or anything like that, because she and I always agreed that I can just be culturally Jewish and married to her. It's important to her that I am Jewish, and I understand all that. With that said, I told her if our kids don't like Hebrew school and then want to quit, 100% I'm going to let them quit. That caused not any sort of constructive argument or even resentful, hatred-filled argument. It was just one of those weird impasses between a husband and a wife where you just kind of shrug. So I'm curious, what is your actual plan, either with or without your wife's permission, if and when you have one child right now?
I have 2.
You have 2, yeah. So you're I got
a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old.
Yeah, so the 2.5-year-old, they're not talking back as much then, but by the time they're 4, you'll definitely have them talking back to you already. So have you discussed that? I mean, do you have a plan? Hi, everybody. This is Mike Oppenheim, the host of Coffin Talk, the show you're currently listening to, and I'm interrupting to ask you if you would mind doing me a favor and subscribing to my online publication called You Are Here on Substack. It features weekly essays. I also have fiction, and of course there are links to the podcast and all the bonus episodes. It's completely free, and I would love your support. So please head over to mikeyop.com, that's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up today. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's something that actually that's a big conversation that happens while we're dating. Actually,
Oh, cool.
before we
Very
even
cool.
decide to get married, because it is something that a lot of or Orthodox couples that I know, or Jewish couples in general, that I know, end up breaking up over. I
Yeah.
mean, because it's a pretty significant change in lifestyle. My college, I had a girlfriend one time that her parents decided later in life that one wanted to become, a little bit more observant, the other one didn't, and they split up after 30 years,
Wow.
um, and it's heartbreaking when that happens. Of course, you hope that both people are living the happiest life that they could live, and if that needs to be, that's the case. But that actually that was something I was considering very strongly, even before I even went to college. I spent a year and a half in Israel,
Cool. Very cool.
at a school there. Yeah, and it was a ton of fun. But I called one of my teachers before I went to college, and I said, right now I know this is really important, and I've grown up with this, and I'm a little concerned that I'm gonna that you lose sight over time, and so you fall in love and you meet someone, and before you know it, you're kind of compromising on this, and maybe you're gonna give in with that, and maybe you don't have to be so invested in this, and I was concerned about that, but what I would ultimately say, I think that, and maybe you've had this experience. Do you ever pick anything up from your parents that they've loved, that like you see that they love with a passion that like means something to you, so you pick it up yourself?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Many times. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the best form of education, in my opinion. To and I've read a good amount on this because education happens to be a passion of mine,
Yeah.
but you can't fake enthusiasm, especially to your kids.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
when your kids, like I could sit here all day and play music that I hate and hope that my kid, hope my son loves it,
Yeah.
But my son's listening to Billy Strings now,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he knows great music, and he reads my face and he reads my passion,
Yeah.
and I think the same thing applies to religion. I engage with it. It's the best part of my life, and I engage with it with enthusiasm and an energy that I hope transmits to him. If he ultimately comes to me and says this isn't for me, I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
I really can't. I could continue to try to be we grew up in the generation of do as I say, not as I do.
Totally.
I would love for him to just observe what I do and see if that's the kind of thing that's for him,
Mhm.
or my daughter,
Yeah.
and so I think, in short, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he didn't like it either, because I love it and because we have community, we have friends. He has kids his age running around that come over on Saturday afternoons. If you can't, go in the car, play with electricity, but you could go play basketball or ride a bike down the block or go with your
Yeah.
scooter and hang out with your buddies in the street or play football. So his association right now is generally extremely positive. He looks forward to all this stuff. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
That's cool. That was a great answer, and I fully agree. I have no, yeah, I like hearing you talk out loud and think out loud because it's helpful for me. And I think one of my best things I want to offer through this show is actually interviewing younger people, of which you still count. No offense, you're 30, but you're still young.
Yeah, well, I'll take
Yeah,
it.
and I think it's because there's just such a very much controversial and on purpose attempt to just defame your entire generation before you even have a chance to spread your wings and fly. And I despise that. I'm so resentful of older people doing that to you guys specifically. And ironically, they are the hippies. The very
Yeah, right.
force that is telling you don't don't step out of the box is the generation that made stepping out of the box famous. So and
Yeah,
just to be
yeah,
fair, my parents love people like you who are, so it's just the media's presentation is what I'm trying to say to my audience. I don't think the actual baby boomer generation has any specific feeling. But my
yeah. I believe that.
yeah. So I with that said, one of the biggest oh my god, what's wrong with them takes on mainstream media is all young people side with Palestine and not Israel, and they're wrong and we're right. And I see it as both sides are duds. Just claiming anything is ridiculous at this point. But I am curious, how much does being a Jew commit you towards entrenchment in those difficult conversations? Are you, because I try very hard to just say, look, I'm an American citizen. I don't live over there. I don't feel like I have a real right to tell people in a foreign country how to live. You lived in Israel, so your experience, I'm sure, is different because of that alone. But I am curious, like, how much do you feel like your generation gets pulled into these arguments?
They definitely get pulled into these arguments quite a bit.
And
I will say that the really, really complicated aspect of that conversation in general is that Israel and Palestine, this conflict, has such a schizophrenic history and such a multifaceted, there's so many different perspectives. Some people look at Israel like it's a religious country. Some people look at Israel like it's a cultural country.
Mhm.
Some people look at it like it's just an extension of the American democracy in the Far East, and it might be an extension of the military-industrial complex for all we know. And the truth is that all of them also might be true at the same time. And so what really gets complicated, and what really gets difficult for a lot of people, and I've spent. It's funny because obviously since October 7th, I've done a lot more learning, homework, and education, educating myself in the history and in the politics and in the topic in general. And the problem is that anyone that says that it's as simple as X, Y, and Z is fundamentally wrong, and I promise that. And at the end of the day, a lot of times it will be, there's an expression, elu ve'elu in Hebrew. It's you're right and you're right,
I love it. I
and
love
there's a famous joke from The Fiddler on the Roof. If the most stereotypic Jewish movie, he goes, "You're right," and he goes, "But you're also right." And he goes, "Well, they can't both be right." And he's like, "Well, you're also right." And he goes, "All three of you guys are right." So I think that we do get dragged into it. I think that everyone would do themselves a huge favor by trying to put themselves in the other person's shoes. Huge impact. And like I teach high school English. I teach 9th, 10th, and 12th graders.
Awesome.
And and at an Orthodox school, obviously they skew extremely pro Israel, or pro Jews generally, obviously. And one thing I said was, and we're talking about post October 7th, they were talking about the war, and then I said, "Can I just ask you guys, like, do you think that they're saying the same thing about us? Like, do you like we're right and we're good and they're bad?" I'm like, do you think they say we're bad and we're just trying to be bad and they're the good guys, we just want to fight the good guys? I'm like, I don't know if it works like that, guys. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. So we do get drawn into it quite a bit. And I think that one of the biggest things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to identify exactly what this conflict is. Is this a political conflict? Is this a religious conflict? Is this, what is this? And then we can kind of work our way from there, but we haven't even done that yet.
Yeah.
So it's impossible to win an argument without defining the terms, right? If you tell me what's this, I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but I'll argue with you about it. Like,
yeah.
Okay, great. I mean, if you want to, but it's a waste of everyone's time. So that's what I think about it.
That's really cool. And I'm really glad you teach high school. I used to teach English, and I taught high school and college. And so I'm a big fan of how much of a difference you can make through like literature discussions without actually talking about specifics. And I love the abstract art, as I call it. And it's funny that like some of the best thinkers come from that tradition and then merge into philosophy or other, academic pursuits.
Yeah.
Wow, I have too many questions with not enough time, but you've done a great job.
You go as long as you want.
I am curious. Well, I had like fun fact questions for what a 30-year-old Orthodox Jew would think. So how would you deal with your children wanting to get tattoos, for example?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Go for it. I wouldn't recommend. If you asked me, I would probably say wait till you're older and decide. If they came back to me at 25 with a tattoo, I'd be like, cool. I mean, like, I haven't seen that. It's funny. I always was kind of a little. I was really never exposed to them. I started rolling jujitsu about 7-8 months ago, and it's everywhere now. So now I kind of think they're pretty cool. So I mean, I wouldn't encourage it, but I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. I think that at that point you're an adult.
Yeah. And you've spoken about drinking beer. I'm assuming like some beers are kosher, others aren't, or are they all kosher?
Yeah, no, definitely not all kosher. It's a great
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
Standard beers are all kosher. So if you go to your brewery and you get a lager, for the most part, it's going to be, unless they throw an additive in, like a famous brewery called a Dogfish Head,
Uh-huh.
which
Yeah.
is all over the place. They're known for throwing oysters or some shellfish into their beer.
Wow. I had no
Yeah, for
idea.
flavoring and for
Wow.
yeah. So there's certain so as craft beer has become a little bit more ambitious with their flavoring, you got to do a little bit more homework. So a lot of times, unless I'll in Fort Lauderdale, there's probably 10 great breweries within a half an hour drive of me. And I know a bunch of the brewers and the owners, and I stop by and I ask them, what'd you put in here? Can you show me the packaging? Let me just make sure that this chocolate sell using Hershey chocolate. Yeah, we're good to go. Cool. You're using
Cool.
instead of marshmallows, you're using marshmallow fluff. Go for it. That's great. So
Awesome. What about marijuana? Is there anything about that in the religion?
uh, great question. Nothing about it in the religion, I would say. It has definitely, there's definitely been a huge uptick with smoking cannabis and marijuana in the Jewish community, as has been, I think, throughout the American culture. Um, it's the same stigma, the same way that it was for anyone, I
Okay.
think, and it's becoming destigmatized. And I mean, I'm doing my best to to make it to show the world that you can be a responsible, normal dad and still smoke a J every now and then and be okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious because it comes up so often. I'm from Berkeley, California, like, and
Mhm.
we don't view marijuana as a drug in that area. Like, literally, no one had ever called it a drug. I went to college in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And people were like, "You do drugs?" And I was like, "No." Like, what? Like completely
It
straight
doesn't
face. Like,
count.
I don't know what you're talking about. Like I only drink and smoke pot, just like every other human, right? And they're like, "No, those are drugs and alcohol." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I see what weird spell captain of industry for alcohol's done to us." But so
Definitely.
in the eyes of the interpretation of the Torah, it's basically just like, obviously you shouldn't be getting like canned and like to the point where you're passing out on a bed and not taking care of your kids. But as far as like your personal relationship with God and then the ability to drink or smoke, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, and like everything else, there's a time and place for it. Generally speaking, it's not encouraged before prayers. For
Well,
example,
yeah,
because
yeah.
prayers, you want to be conscious, and you want to be as aware as possible. And the same thing applies for drinking in that context too. But as far as everyday life goes, I'm not. There's no mention of it, and I'm not familiar with it. Just the regular stigma that, And you know what? I bet 1,000 years ago they were smoking Jays,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
some kind of variation of it. So who cares? Nothing to it.
That's really cool. And then I think now I should actually just ask you, what do you think happens when you die? Because we've done a lot of, I love the way you answer questions. I like the way you think as you answer. I like the way you listen. So I just wanted to make sure you understand how nice it is to have a cooperative podcast relationship with someone. And I'm glad that you podcast. And I would like to again mention, as I said at the top of the show, that he does have his own podcast called Come Together with Ephraim Herschmann. And please check it out. There'll be links in the
Thank
notes and
you.
all that. With that said, the question we always ask on the show is, what do you think happens when you die? And so I just, to make sure I'm being clear here, I don't care what the Torah says or any of that. I want to know what you think will happen when you die.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to believe that there's a large consciousness, a large shared consciousness. I think I had a really interesting experience recently. My grandfather, who I was very close with, passed away 2 years ago now, and he was really the primary father, stereotypical father figure in my life. My dad was always very laid back and really chill, and he and I are extremely close. We worked together, but he was always more of a friend than the way that a dad like sits down and like talk, gives you a talking to. And I think when I was having a little bit of, uh, I was processing the fact that I was becoming a dad. And I went to a breathwork class. It was, it almost gets you into a psychedelic state. And I wanted to just check under the hood and see where my head was at. And I didn't know what I was going to think about. And it turns out I was thinking a lot about parenting, but in this state of the, breath, this breathing state where you kind of inhale and exhale to the extent that you get yourself into, you change the amount of oxygen in your brain, and you kind of almost trip, really. And my grandfather's soul or spirit was hanging out with me.
That's cool.
And I got a real sense of his emotional state, that I felt there were like things that were not yet, he hadn't come to terms with yet. He had not yet resolved. And I was processing that with him, for him. And I think, and as I walked away thinking that was absolutely bonkers, and calling my mom and talking to her about, like feeling I was directly communicating with my grandfather's soul. I felt, that was another, example that I think fortified my belief that there is, I don't like, it's a continuation of life, and I think that that our continuation of life, our consciousness continues. And listen, I imagine babies in the womb probably think their entire lives are the womb, and then they're born, and then they get 100 years here, if 120 years here if they're lucky, and who knows what the next step is. I mean, imagine that times 10. If it's going to be times 9 months and you live to 90, imagine that times the amount of how long we live for. So I think that this is just the beginning. I think this world is this, and every culture and every religion kind of feels like they have this same kind of idea that this world's a passageway, for something bigger and something greater. And I think that it has a lot to do with our consciousness. I think that as science develops, we're going to realize how much consciousness actually plays a physical, a role in reality.
Yeah.
And it's going to be exciting. I'm really excited for what's going to happen.
I definitely think like the double slit experiments and all those things about like the observers, what matters, is totally leading us towards, now we just need equipment to detect that and prove it and all that. So we'll see if we get there. I have 2 quick questions. Well, maybe they're not quick. Who would I know? But in your answer, it for me begged the question of, so do you think that before you were in the womb, you were nothing? Or do you think there was a you before that who then was the you in the womb, who now is the you talking to Mike on his podcast, and then later will be the you in the next phase?
I think there's probably both. I think that there's probably people that are here for the first time, and I think that there are people that are coming back.
Okay.
And and there's ideas in Jewish literature which I guess are kind of comforting. Or the idea that we're put on this earth now, like this, the lives that we're living, to make up for something that we were missing out on in a previous life. So if for example, I'm terrible at confrontation, right?
Yeah.
I hate confrontation.
Wow.
And I'm insecure about it, and so if I go and I work on this particular personality trait that I need to continue, then and it says, like your fear of confrontation is a lack of confidence in yourself, and the lack of confidence in yourself comes from not appreciating what you have and what you're doing, and what you could do with it, and you got to figure that out before you can go and make the most of your potential. Then I'm put back here to accomplish that. Like, that seems really cool, cool. And and I do think that I think that people probably have more than one go around, and I think that there's some times where you're just starting fresh and you're going to see what's going on, and then maybe they'll come back in 50 years or 100 years, who knows.
That's awesome. This is related, but I'm not a psychologist. But how many siblings do you have, and what order are you born in?
I'm the oldest of 6.
Okay. I'm just, the confrontation thing to me is like so helpful to hear whenever anyone brings it up, because I feel like America, and I'm only talking about our culture, is just pummeling people with like, the more confrontational you are, the better. And I'm like very worried about that. I'm also worried about people like you who are afraid of it because it's such a necessary part of aging, like for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed, and I'm sorry, if you got to cut it short, but one of the things I've noticed, even with my own life, I grew up in this weird twilight zone where phones and texting were just breaking out and just becoming popular. And growing up again in an Orthodox school, I grew up until 11th grade. I was never in a class with girls. I was in all boys schools, and And I was terrified of talking to girls. I was genuinely, I didn't know what to do. I didn't, I'm all tense. I'm like, when they ask me, what's your name? Like, you know,
No,
I just gotta go. I'll see you later. You know? And I found that it's way easier to text. And I found that, hey, you know, I could be a little nice. I could be a little flirty. It's easy to say, how's your day going? And just like pop in on someone. And I think that has, and that for me, for many years, replaced my ability to look at someone in the face and say, here's what I really think, or, you know, I don't know what your reaction is going to be, but, you know, here's my 2 cents on this. And what do you think about that? And I think that everyone born after me, I like, you know, again, my high schoolers, or my younger siblings, they grew up with that. You know, they grew up with texting and like this lack of face-to-face interactions being ubiquitous, essentially. And so I think that that's probably the root of a lot of it, is that we're just not familiar. All this stuff are muscles that you got to learn how to flex and how to use. And if you don't use it or lose it, you know, I mean, if you never learn how to, I walk into the supermarket, and if you say hi to someone, they look at you like you're a lunatic, and they like run away. You know, kids are afraid to make eye contact with you. They have the headphones in, they're on their phone, you know, and then you talk to someone above the age of 40, and you're like, how's it going? And they're like, oh, look, another human being. How are you? You know, like, cool. So
dude,
that's what I think about.
Oh man, you nailed it. That's the only thing. I'm middle-aged. I'm 44, and it is like so hard to go into a store and just see the person with the one headphone in and just know that like their boss doesn't care. They don't get like, cause like, I don't like retail. I don't like any of that crap. I'm not a big like go shopping and save America person, but I am a fan of like just common courtesy and how much it like helps us see that like, you know, like you're just supposed to smile and show both your hands. That means you don't have a knife and you're not going to kill me. Like it goes way back to like prehistoric eras, but I feel like we're losing that with like what you just described. You know, I'm sure this is so cliche to say, but you're just such a nice, sweet man. I just want to let you know that you're like a really like
that, man. Thank you so much.
It's cool. I'm really glad that you're where you are and that you're teaching and that you're married and you're fathering kids. It never gets easy, so don't worry. It's all you're like I have a 10-year-old, a 4-year-old, and almost 2-year-old, and it's just
nice.
Every time you think you're out of like something, you're not, and like the next thing isn't harder or not harder. It's just new.
Yeah, I know. So that's the also, and you know, as far as the religious thing goes, I think that the more you practice being intentional about what you do, the more you catch yourself from reacting instead of acting, you know? So like listen, I'm far from perfect, you know, but like my kid's crying all the night, and you know, it's and he's being completely unreasonable because he's 2.5 and he makes no sense. And I'm like, dude, you're being unreasonable. And then you know, and he goes, and I go, okay, wait, but like, he's a 2.5-year-old, like, you know, and you catch yourself, and I think that really helped me. That helps me a lot. I think the practicing intentionality, also with my wife, also with fighting. You know, I mean, you're about to. I was such a before I married my wife to the other relationships I was in, and I had to learn to not be. So I think that all this stuff is just a matter of practice and a matter of time.
Yeah. Wow. That's you're gonna do just fine. If you've been married as long as you have, and you're already willing to admit what you just said about what you were like, that's really the key. It's not happy wife, happy life. It's own your own crap and be accountable, happy life. Like I kind of don't agree with like the full on phrase, but there is a maturity gap, and there's a lot going on in all of what we just talked about. So, Ephraim, thank you so much. This has been an amazing
Definitely, man. I'm so happy to be here. This is really so much fun.
You're great, and I'm definitely going to check out your show, and I love the title, and I am a hippie, and I'm a fan of yours. I do always give my guests the floor at the end of the interview. Just, is there any message you want to tell people, like how to save the world, how to save yourself?
Yes. More in-person experiences, for sure. Take the effort, take the time, go out, go hear some live music, go try a new class or an activity that you haven't done before, go to a park and talk to someone. It will change your life. And look for relationships. I think marriage, for some reason, there's some kind of weird like stigma against like families and marriage in this world today. And there is nothing better than meaningful, real relationships. So embodied experiences, be with people, don't be alone, and have a family.
Awesome. Ephraim, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show.
Such a pleasure, man. This is really great.
Cool. Well, it'll come out in about 2 weeks. So for those of you listening at home, this was recorded about 10 days ago, which is about the closest we ever cut it with Coffin Talk. So thank you again. You've been amazing.
My pleasure.
And to everyone at home, the best way to support the show is to head over to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com and sign up for the free emails that I send out, which are usually humorous, sometimes sad, but always fulfilling, spiritually enriching, and the greatest thing you'll ever do with your time in your life, including more than family. Like, definitely ignore your family to listen to me on a podcast and read my books. No, but for all seriousness,
I haven't read it yet, but I have to agree.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm officially endorsed by the smartest 30-year-old in the universe. So we're we go. We're off to the races. But seriously, thank you again, Ephraim, and thank you everyone at home. And once again, my name is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening to or watching Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon. When I hear this song and I walk into you.